Thank you for joining me. This is Psych 92. This is a review for midterm 2. So we'll go over the study guide, and then if there are questions about specific concepts that you want me to expand on, just stop and let me know. So midterm 2 is covering chapters 4 through 6. That would be early childhood through adolescence. So what I did in the study guide is I broke it down by domain. So for physical development, in your textbook, there is a chart of things that people can do to age 2, 3, 4, and 5. So you should have a general idea of what they can do in terms of gross and fine motor abilities. That one's pretty straightforward. In terms of brain development, right? Remember that you are born with almost all the neurons that you will ever have in your life. So the density that we see in brain scans is not because we have more neurons, but because of dendrite growth. So remember, dendrites are kind of like the branches that you see in neurons. And as we learn, as we are exposed to new experiences, new ideas, what happens is the dendrites continue to multiply because we are developing more synapses. And the synapse is the little gap between the dendrite, the axon of one neuron, and the axon of another one. So dendrites continue to grow. Myelination, remember, the myelin sheath is that fatty covering over the axons of the neurons, and that increases processing speed. So it's really important for kids to have enough fat, like really nutritious food. So we're not talking about, unhealthy fat, but you should never be giving children a fat-free diet. This is not the time to be doing it. They need the fat to have the myelin sheath covering in their brains. Synaptogenesis, remember you hear genesis, you should be thinking growth and development. So synapses continue to form. We have a lot of it that's happening. On the other hand, remember we talk about multi-directional change. When you have growth, you also have loss. Synaptic pruning is the loss component, where if people aren't using the skills or abilities or knowledge, they're going to lose it. So it's a matter of really making your brain more efficient. You don't want a lot of things in your brain that aren't going to be useful. And so that's part of the efficiency that's developing in our brains. Corpus callosum, remember, is that band of fibers that connects the left hemisphere to the right hemisphere. The fact that that corpus callosum starts to be more integrated, more connected, that leads to further plasticity in children. So if somebody was right hand dominant and had a severe accident and couldn't use their right hand anymore, it's because of the corpus callosum that allows a lot of the skills and abilities to be further developed into the other hand or left hand instead. Any questions about the physical development component? Okay. Cognitive development. So here you should be thinking about those skills that Piaget really highlighted. So remember that sensory motor stage, it's called sensory motor because children are learning, their brain is developing primarily because of their newfound ability to move. That's the motor component. So they use their senses to explore the world and learn more about it. In the pre-operational stage now, they're starting to go deeper into what they can learn, and they make errors based on the lack of cognitive development. So one of the issues, what they do in early childhood is they love to engage in pretend play. Animism is when they give lifelike characteristics to inanimate objects. So they might say a door hit them, or they might say, the table jumped at me, or little things like that. It helps with their imagination and everything. It's really cute. Their pre-causal reasoning is very flawed. So when they see correlations, they're able to observe correlations, but their reasoning in terms of which likely came first or what is the cause of things that happen, it's very flawed, right? So again, example, if they just see a correlation, if they say, let's say you have a visitor coming over and, parents have you cleaning up and everything. And then they think that, it's the visitor has some magic powers that makes it happen, right? So their reasoning is different than what adult reasoning would be. Major error in cognition is known as centration, where they focus on one specific characteristic and ignore others. So they don't understand compensatory attributes. So with egocentrism, they're focused on themselves. They believe everyone has the same knowledge base, that they have the same desires, they have the same beliefs as they do. So it's almost like a communal thinking. It's egocentrism because they just can't understand that other people might want different things. The conservation errors that they make because they're centered again on just one feature. So 3 types of conservation errors, right? They have the conservation of mass, conservation of liquid, and conservation of number. If you watch the videos that we showed with Piaget and everything with those Piagetian tasks, conservation error for liquid would be you can take the 2 glasses of the exact same amount of liquid and then right in front of them, you pour one into a tall, skinny glass. And because they're centered only on how high the water is, and they're not thinking about that the width is different, that compensatory component, they'll make the mistake and think that the one with the higher level has more liquid, even though you showed them at the very beginning, you say, do these 2 glasses have the same amount of water? And they'll say, yes. They're like, okay, well, what if I put liquid into this other one? Do they still have the same? They'll say no, right? So that's the errors in reasoning that they make. Classification errors, again, they focus on only one feature. So an item that could be classified in multiple ways, they will not do that. They'll only classify it one way. For example, an elephant, that can be classified as maybe a gray animal or an African animal, or it can be 4 legs, it can be a mammal. So they're different characteristics, but a child who is in pre-operational stage, they will only focus on one and not consider the other aspects of the item or thing. Any questions about those components? Okay, make sure you know the differences in these errors of centration. Theory is the observation, the concept that kids at this stage make up their own theories about things. So remember, when we talk about Piaget and assimilation and accommodation, the key in Piaget's framework is the word schema. A schema is our mental map that helps us understand the world. So theory, according to Piaget, once we don't understand something, we fall into disequilibrium. Our balance, our sense of balance is gone, and that disequilibrium is very uncomfortable, but that discomfort motivates us to learn. So it's actually a good thing, right? So theory is, let's say maybe people aren't around to explain things, or maybe they can't find it in a book or anything, some new event happened and they don't understand it, they'll make it up. They'll make up their own theory of why this is. So that's the whole idea of theory. Theory is the concept that kids at this age will make up theories to explain what's going on in the world. Theory of mind occurs later, right? So in early childhood, the very beginning, they don't have theory of mind. This kind of goes back into that egocentrism component we talked about. When kids develop theory of mind, they understand that other people do have different desires, they have different beliefs, they have different knowledge, right? Those kind of things, they can grasp that. So at the beginning of early childhood, they don't have that. It's that egocentrism. Towards the end, and it's only a matter of months, they suddenly develop theory of mind where they can grasp that idea that, you know, we are individuals. We're separate from each other. We're not all connected in that one mind component. Know the differences in between Piaget's approach and Vygotsky's approach. Remember, Piaget was very much children are little scientists. Give them a safe place to explore, and they will learn on their own. Piaget's is discontinuous because he had stages. Vygotsky, on the other hand, had a continuous perspective of cognitive development, and he very much emphasized the role of others. So his was a sociocultural theory, right? Vygotsky talked about the importance of being with more knowledgeable others, and that whole idea about that zone of proximal development where individuals by themselves can only learn to a certain extent, right? So that's kind of a little circle. And then beyond that circle, the zone of proximal development is how much more people can learn with the assistance of others, teachers, mentors, even older kids who know more, that they can learn so much more with that assistance. And even then there's kind of even that zone of proximal development, there's a limit to that, right? Where just because of cognitive, maybe their stage in cognitive development, even with all this other assistance, they just can't get there. So scaffolding is the term that we use when we talk about the little steps, the little things that we kind of help people, the little hints that we give people to get to that higher level of knowledge and acquisition. So you're not supposed to be telling them everything. The scaffolding is sort of the little hints, the little bits of help, guidance that we can provide to help people reach their potential in the zone of proximal development. Any questions about that part?
Professor, I wanted to know the transductive reasoning in the centration part, if you could explain.
Transductive reasoning. So that, again, with the centration, you're focusing on only one component, right? So with transductive reasoning, now you're able to transfer the knowledge and understanding of one part into another. So it's that transfer of knowledge. So with children in the pre-operational stage, they're not able to do that. There's a lot of limitations in the pre-operational stage. With even symbolic functioning, they are great at imaginary play, but they have limits in their understanding of, okay, I have my bonus son broke his leg because he put a cape on, thinking he put a blanket on saying it was a cape, and then he jumped off of a high level and broke, right?
Yeah.
Those are the mistakes they make, right? The intuitive thought substage. Remember we talked about ways of knowledge.
Yeah.
This stage, it's all intuitive. They're not thinking about, rationalization. They have so many limitations in their cognitive development that they are right now, they're just at intuitive thought. This is where the reasoning becomes very flawed at this stage. But the good part is it's only for a few months. If you watch the videos from Ph.D, you'll see it's the same kids and they look the same. It's just they're not making the same mistakes. So the time difference between when they were making mistakes and when their brain develops enough to the point that they can overcome it is only a matter of months. It's really fascinating.
Okay. And it says unable to perform necessary operation, mental reverse action. Is it like part of transductive?
Yeah, it is all tied in together with the lack of cognitive development. It's all
Okay. All right. Yeah. Thank you.
sure. And then remember, another perspective, another framework we use for cognitive growth is the information processing theory, where we liken our ability to recall things like a computer, right? So computer's input would be keyboard, the trackpad, right? Maybe a camera. For our input, it's our senses. Those are the input devices for us. So with information processing, remember we have different types of attention. So make sure you know the difference between divided attention, where that's kind of the whole idea of multitasking. Selective attention is being able to focus even though there are other distractions. And then sustained attention is simply being able to stay on task for an extended period of time. Types of memory. Sensory memory is just like right at that point that you're hearing things. So remember, there's a difference between hearing and listening. Hearing means that your ears, right, the sensory receptors in your ears are picking up stimuli. That's hearing. But listening is processing that sensory input and making meaning out of it. So there's a difference there. So our senses pick up many different components that we aren't even conscious of, because if we were conscious of everything our senses are picking up, we would go insane. So our brain automatically filters these things out. Now, working memory, right? That is very short term. Again, it's sort of like at that point in time where you're hearing things, you're using what you're hearing, maybe you're typing things out. If you do not do anything with those pieces of information that you're gathering, you're going to lose it. It does not become long-term memory. So it takes effort and intentionality to take short-term memory into long-term memory so that you can recall it again later. And we have different types of long-term memory, right? So explicit and implicit. Explicit memories would be something like this. You're trying to intentionally learn these facts, these concepts, and you want to put it into your mind so that you can recall it later. Implicit memories tend to be those that are skills-based. So that's kind of the muscle memory you might have heard of, where you do a task repeatedly, it gets to a point where you don't even think about it anymore. Think about driving, for example, right? At first, I don't know about you, but I was like really stressed out when I first was learning how to drive. My arms were like so tired because I was so tense holding the steering wheel. You know, you're trying to keep track of everything, looking around, making sure you know where all the other cars are, all of that. You do it enough times and then it becomes second nature, right? The muscle memory, that is implicit memory, where you're not intentionally trying to do it anymore. It's just through repetition and constant practice that it gets into your brain and you're not even thinking about it. Um, semantic memory that has to do with these facts and things that are happening that aren't tied to a timeline. So even learning about, you know, what's the definition of these terms, those kind of things, they're semantic. It's not like, oh, when you're 5 years old, this is what happened. Like, so those kind of memories that are tied to a timeline in our life are episodic and autobiographical. So semantic are things that we learn that are sort of standalone, right? Isn't tied to a timeline. Whereas episodic and autobiographical, those are tied to a timeline. Questions about different types of memory and attention?
I had a question, Professor. Um, can you give an example of a question where the answer would be selective attention and an example of a question where it would be sustained attention?
Um, I would probably do some sort of situational component where maybe Luffy is trying to decide, is working on his map of the Grand Line and also listening to music and coming up with, you know, new lyrics to a song. Is this an example of divided attention, selective attention, or sustained attention, or none of the above? So I would give an example of something somebody's doing, and then you tell me which one it is.
Okay.
So yeah, that would be like divided. If it's selective, maybe it could be the same situation. He's trying to create a map of the Grand Line, and all of his crew are fighting around him. That's
Hmm.
just selective attention. He's not paying attention to them, right? Working on the map for several hours at a time, that would be sustained attention.
Oh, okay. Gotcha. Thank you.
Um, any other questions about this part? Okay, so socio-emotional development in Erickson's framework. Remember, we're at the stage where it's initiative versus guilt in early childhood. Wonderful time to be, you know, getting the kids to help with housework or things like that, because they want to feel like they're contributing members of the household, right? So that's what they want to do. They are self-motivated at this stage and they want to contribute to others. Because their abilities very much tied to their self-concept. So remember, when you ask kids at this age, tell me about yourself, they're going to talk about what they can do. Well, I can recite my ABCs backwards. I can, you know, jump off blocks, or, you know, it's all about their abilities at this stage. They're not thinking very deeply about their personality or things like that. So that's very much tied to that whole initiative versus guilt component. This is the start of when kids start to develop some of their social identities. And when, you know, we talk about gender identity, it usually develops before ethnic or racial identity. We talked about different theories of gender development, right? So make sure you know the difference between gender, gender role, gender typing, gender identity. So gender, remember, is distinct from biological sex. Biological sex is the sex that a doctor, upon viewing a baby, assigns into their birth certificate, whether they're male or female. Gender is the psychological component to one's understanding of what it means to be male or female, right? How do you get that? Well, our society gives us messages about what our gender role is. What is it? What's appropriate for those who are male identified as opposed to female identified? So gender typing is you start to acquire, start to integrate those ideas of what society says is appropriate. And then gender identity is fully kind of embracing that role that you've taken on. So in early childhood, most kids, right, we're talking about normative development here. Most kids, their gender identity is consistent with their biological sex. What the American Psychological Association has come up with is that if there is dysmorphia, right, where their gender identity is not consistent with the biological sex, that in itself is not problematic. What's problematic is if they start to feel distress about that situation. And that's where, we need to really talk to the child and how they're feeling and everything, and try to offer support. So obviously this is a really very touchy subject. So here, what we really talk about is like, so how do people even get these ideas of gender, right? So there are many theories of gender development. We really covered 3. With social learning theory, the idea is that kids get the idea of what is appropriate when you're male identified or female identified from others. That's why it's called social learning theory. So they see their primary caregivers who have their own identities, they see how they behave, and then they imitate them, right? So the modeling is from primary caregivers or others in their life. Then they imitate these behaviors, and then based on differential reinforcements, right, they decide whether they want to continue those behaviors or not. So those are the 3 components for social learning theory: modeling, imitation, and differential reinforcement. If you're missing any of those, you will not get full points if you're explaining it. It's the little smile. So the differential reinforcement is how the caregivers react to the imitation. If it is positive, meaning it could be a smile, it could be a, oh, you're so cute, they're going to repeat the behavior. If in any way they see that as negative, meaning the person looks uncomfortable, maybe it's a frown, maybe it's like, what are you doing? Boys don't do that. Then they get the message it's not appropriate, and they will discontinue those behaviors. Any questions about social learning theory?
So Professor, not about the social learning theory, I wanted to know a bit more on the marshmallow test about the self-control. So I saw the test and the video, but what are we trying to infer out of it? Like the response initiation and the delayed gratification, what is missing in this age group?
What do you mean, what is missing?
So in this uh, life stage, the child would have the self-control, or will not be able to wait till that second marshmallow is given. So I wanted to understand what's happening. What are we trying to infer out of it?
So the fact is that many children are able to delay gratification. And what that test is fascinating, because it actually became a longitudinal study. And what they found from that was the ones who were able to delay gratification, they had self-control, they had much better life outcomes than the ones who couldn't wait. And that's how we realized how important self-control really is. So it's not that kids aren't able to, they're able to. If you watch the video, you saw plenty of them didn't do it, right?
Yeah.
And those who were able to wait, who understood that, oh, if I just wait a little longer, I can have more marshmallows. That's the concept of delayed gratification that we found out was so important for their life outcomes. The ones who could not wait, who had no self-control, did not do as well. Didn't do as well in work, didn't do as well in relationships. There were just so many outcomes that we found out. Yeah, so it was a really important study.
But we're not saying that this age group will not be able to have a self-control? It can vary from
It-
child to child.
It definitely varies. They are capable of self-control, but it's at early childhood. We don't expect it from toddlers.
Mm-hmm.
In early childhood, they are capable.
Okay, all right.
About the age of 7 is often you might hear the term the age of reason.
Okay.
That is so at that age, especially, we would expect them to be able to have self-control. And if they can't, then that's something that parents should work on with their kids. It's not something impossible.
Yeah.
And kids can learn it, but it takes work from the caregivers.
Okay.
There's an innate component to it where some kids are just more patient than others, right? But there's a component that can definitely be
It
trained.
can be, yeah, the child can learn. Yeah.
And
Got it.
thank goodness,
All
because-
right, thank you.
Sure. So gender schema theory, remember, in terms of gender development, the idea there is kids have, again, a mental map of what it means to be a boy or a girl, and then when they approach new situations, they decide whether these things are relevant to them or not. If it's relevant to them, they assimilate it and then they go on. If it's not relevant, then they ignore it. As I mentioned to many of you in my hybrid class, the problem with gender schema theory is it doesn't really explain how kids get this mental map, right? So whereas social learning theory helps you understand how they may have acquired these understandings, gender schema theory it's almost like, okay, they just have these maps and this is what they do. Developmental intergroup theory, on the other hand, really, again, focuses on very much the social aspect and including media. So it's the messages kids are getting from their culture, from their society on what is appropriate and inappropriate based on their gender identity. So those are the three theories of gender development that we discussed. Any questions?
I'm sorry, can you go over the three components for social learning theory?
Yes, so the three components for social learning theory are modeling. That's by the primary caregivers or those in their life, usually older people. Imitation, and then differential reinforcement.
Okay, thank you.
So the modeling is what they see, right? Someone else doing. Then they imitate it. They copy the behavior. And you can't stop there, because what it is that it's the differential reinforcement that really determines if they continue the behaviors or not. So whether it's positively viewed by their primary caregivers or role models or negatively viewed, that's where they start to acquire that idea of what is appropriate and not for boys and girls. Is that good, Bella?
Yes, thank you.
Some terms to remember, as I mentioned, gender dysphoria is when the person actually does not feel like their gender identity is consistent with their biological sex. So transgender is when people actually want to change their gender, even their biology with it. So cisgender is when your gender identity is consistent with your biological sex. Intersex is that specific condition in which people actually have both components, both male and female genitalia, different aspects to them, and they're called intersex because they are literally in between the sexes. And this is why we realize it's a spectrum. A lot of times we think of it as male or female, like a dichotomy, but actually it's a spectrum, because you do have a group of people who for a variety of reasons, oftentimes it's exposure that the mom has experienced. They don't have clearly defined male or female genitalia. It might be a mix of both. Remember that we all start off female, and it is something in the Y chromosome that triggers the mom to, have the baby develop into a male. But all of us actually start off as female, and it's something in the Y chromosome that triggers the ovaries, what used to be ovaries, to become testicles and all of those things. So that's why you can have people who have intersex, because we all start off the same way, and for some reason during development it is not fully triggered to be one or the other. Talked about social identity, started the beginning of that. We also talked about social identity in adolescence, but it does start in early childhood because we're talking now, remember, just even gender identity is a social identity. So social cognition is that concept that when we meet people, we are actually subconsciously doing things to categorize. So first thing we do is categorize. Is this person the same gender as I am, same age, same race or ethnicity? We automatically see that. We walk into a room, we're actually observing that about people. Then we identify which group that we're in among the people that are there with us, and then we compare in terms of power dynamics. Am I in a position of vulnerability? So if you are less in numbers, so what social cognition says is that we automatically are aware of the social group in which we are a minority. So if you're in a group full of Evergreen Valley College students and you're a San Jose City College student, like let's say everyone's wearing Evergreen shirts and you're like one person wearing San Jose City, you're gonna right away feel that. You'll be like, oh, shoot, everybody is Evergreen except for me. So even if it was a room full of, let's say it's all Latino kids, all Latino females, but they're wearing, most of them are Evergreen and one's wearing City College, even though they have other things in common, the person becomes hyper aware of whatever social group they're in that is the minority in that situation. I believe it's an evolutionary trait for survival, right? You need to know if you're in danger, you will be in the most danger if you're a minority. So that's the idea of social cognition. That kids at this age start to become very aware of those components. So self-control, I already kind of talked about that with Jasmine, right? So components to self-control is response initiation, where you stop yourself from doing something you want to. You just don't do it, right? Somebody cuts you off on the freeway, you get really upset, and you don't like drive after them even though you really want to. That's response initiation. Response inhibition is when you start an action and you're able to stop yourself in the middle of it. So in that example I gave of being cut off, you get really mad and you start speeding up and then you realize this is not worth it and you stop. That's response inhibition. And then delayed gratification, you don't even let it bother you. You're just like, you know what? I'm going to get to my destination safely. That person's a madman. They're going to have, they're going to get a ticket or something, and you don't even worry about it. The ultimate example of delayed gratification would be our degrees, right? We're going to school, we're taking all these classes, we might not like them, but the big picture at the end, the reward is getting our degree, getting our education. That's an example of delayed gratification. Any questions about self-control? Okay, parenting styles. You should know all 4 of them very well so that if you're given a situation, you can actually decide which parenting style it is. So authoritative, remember, rhymes with give. So this is a parent who's high in control, but also high in warmth and responsiveness. So this is a parent who has standards, has expectations, and when a child doesn't follow them or doesn't do well by them, they will be punished, but also there's warmth and responsiveness. So it will be mitigated, right? That's usually the gold standard for parenting. Authoritarian rhymes with barbarian. This is the parent who's my way or the highway, the drill sergeant parent who has high expectations, but doesn't give support to meet it. So, if the child goes wrong with an authoritarian parent, they're going to get spanked, hit, whatever, like really extreme punishments. That would be authoritarian. Permissive parents are low in expectations, but high in responsiveness. So they don't offer a whole lot of guidance. They're the best friend parent who, just wants to be buddy and just do all the fun stuff with the kids and not really go into the discipline component. And then uninvolved parents have low expectations and low responsiveness. They are too busy to really engage with their children. And so we do know that having low expectations, doesn't have good outcomes for kids. Even though they might enjoy it, it actually, kids rise to our level of expectation. They really do. And you need to give them that, the confidence, right? That, yes, we believe in you. We know you can do it. And then you just support them to be able to do it. Any questions about parenting styles? All right, let's move on to middle and late childhood. So with physical development, we start to see a big disparity in terms of strength and physical ability between boys and girls. This is where, so prior in early childhood, there isn't that much difference in terms of strength. But in middle childhood, that's where boys get a lot stronger than girls, especially with upper body strength. So it does make sense to have a division between, boys teams and girls teams, because there's a physiological difference there. Middle and late childhood, sometimes I think Freud called it the latent period, because things kind of slow down, right? So here growth slows down quite a bit. And so there's that risk of becoming overweight or obese at this stage if kids continue to eat and they're not, burning off the calories as much. So make sure you know there are a lot of health risks involved with people who become obese, especially a host of health conditions that include diabetes, heart problems. You start to have joint problems, just carrying the weight, all of these things. And it has a lot of negative repercussions for kids, because kids who are obese or overweight tend to be bullied as well. So they're not just physical problems, but cognitive problems that occur, and emotional problems that are all tied in together with it. So we want to make sure that you don't emphasize weight. What you should emphasize with kids at this age is really activity. Physical activity is so important to introduce and keep up at this stage. So really not a whole ton of physical development. Those are the main components. Any questions before we move on to cognitive development? Okay, so for cognitive development, I am not going to language development. So make sure you know that. Major cognitive differences between pre-operational stage and concrete operational stage. It's really, they don't make those mistakes anymore, right? So decentration is a big component where they're no longer just focused on those single attributes that they used to be stuck on or fixated on in early childhood. So the cognitive concepts you should be aware of are inductive reasoning, classification, identity, reversibility, conservation, and decentration. Make sure you know the differences among those. So those are the skills now in the concrete operational stage that kids can engage in. With mediation deficiency, production deficiency, and utilization deficiency, those had to do with memory strategies, right? So memory mediation deficiency, they don't even know how to use it properly, right? They have to be prompted to use it. Production deficiency, they don't know. They won't use it without being told. So they are aware of all these different strategies, but they don't even know when to use it. And utilization deficiencies, they don't use the strategy correctly. Metacognition is the ability to think about your thinking. So meta means that you're higher level. Cognition involves our thought processes. If somebody has metacognition, they can think about the ways they learn. So for example, if you say, I'm a visual learner, that's an indication of metacognition. You have an understanding of how best you learn, right? So at this age, in middle and late childhood, they start to have that understanding. Also, we do a lot of testing in middle and late childhood. So this is where the idea of the different theories of intelligence come up. So make sure you know basic components of the theory and who developed the theory. So Spearman was general and specific intelligences, general intelligences being kind of the major components that are included for people who do well in school, academic achievements correlated with that. Specific intelligence has to do with more skills that are expert level. I mean, so you might have a specific intelligence, for example, in calligraphy or something like that, where it's not a general skill that you're able to do that makes you good at something, but actually something that you likely were trained into. Cattell talked about the fluid and crystallized intelligence being more of the kind of the semantic memory kind of idea, that it keeps building. So as you get older, your knowledge base grows, your crystallized intelligence grows. Fluid intelligence, on the other hand, is more of a adaptive, more problem-solving ability. So fluid, think about, liquids can easily take the shape of different containers, right? So likewise, fluid intelligence, you're able to manipulate it and change it according to the need of the situation. That's the problem-solving component. Sternberg came up with the triarchic theory, right? To said, well, if you have these three types of intelligences, you're going to be good. So that's the analytic intelligence, practical intelligence, and creative intelligence. Gardner, on the other hand, said, no, that's not enough. We have 8 intelligences, and he talked about the different, like the kinesthetic, the artistic, naturalistic, interpersonal. There are all these different intelligences. So both Sternberg and Gardner didn't think that 2 is enough, and they further divided it. Dweck's theory of intelligence was not so much about what type of intelligence we had, but more about the mindset, how we thought about intelligence. So her idea, remember, was that if you think you are born with all the intelligence you will ever have, that is a fixed mindset. And if you believe that your intelligence can be developed and, increased with practice, then that is a growth mindset. And what a lot of her research and other people's research have found is that those with the growth mindset actually have much better outcomes in life. Again, these things, fortunately, can be trained. Convergent thinking is when, sorry, I'm charge this. Convergent thinking has to do with coming up to a single right answer. Divergent thinking is when you're encouraging creativity. So most of the time in school, sorry, I need to get my charger working. Most of the time in school, we're looking for convergent thinking, convergent answers, right? Where you come up with the right answer or approximate it. With divergent thinking, a task of that would be like, how many different ways can you use a pencil? And then so in a divergent thinking task, you would give people a piece of paper and ask them to come up with, so many ways for a common object, give them maybe 5 minutes. And then you have to cross out all the different ways that you have come up with that other people have come up with as well. And the person with the most unique ways has the most divergent thinking. That's how it's calculated. IQ test, as flawed as it is, we still use it quite often. So remember, IQ is intelligence quotient. Make sure you know how to calculate it, right? Which one do you divide by which? Is it the mental age by chronological age? Is it chronological age by mental age? Because that's going to make a difference, right? You have that calculation times 100. That is the intelligence quotient. Any questions about the cognitive development component?
I have a question. The theories of intelligence, I was not able to get it. How the question can be formed in these, or just need to understand the different components of all theories. And if you can give an example, what kind of a question can be
Something like compare Spearman's general and specific intelligences with Cattell's fluid and crystallized intelligence. This is part of the short answer, right? Well enough that you could do something like that. Or if I gave you this is a great thing for matching, right? I describe it and then you tell me which one is the theorist.
Okay, all right. So, for example, for the Sternberg's triarchic theory, the 4 types, so we are saying that this age group has all 4 types of intelligence, and we are just categorizing it.
No, so it's 3 types. That's why it's triarchic theory. It's 3.
Oh, yeah, sorry. Yeah.
3 types. And at this age, we do a lot of intelligence testing. And so it depends on the person who's testing what their perspective is of intelligence. These are the main ones. So you would be able to tell based on how the testing is being done, what perspective of intelligence they're taking up, right? And like you might agree with some and not agree with others,
Okay.
right? So, but it is at this age we start doing things like intelligence testing.
Okay. All right. Thanks.
Anything else with quite a lot in cognitive development? Okay, socio-emotional development. So now we're talking industry versus inferiority. Remember, in terms of socio-emotional, early childhood, self-esteem is at an all-time high. It's a wonderful age to be talking to kids because they're so optimistic. Middle and late childhood, that changes because now social comparison comes into play and it never leaves us, right? So industry versus inferiority, kids at this age, they are setting goals and they want to meet those goals. And that meeting those goals is the industrious component. The inferiority comes in is if they realize that all the things they're doing does not match up with their peers. So it's like, oh, this person is doing so much more than I am. And then they start to feel really bad about it. So in early childhood, they want to do things, but it's self-initiated and they're not comparing themselves to others. They just feel good helping and contributing. In middle and late childhood, now if they want to do things, but it's also to beat XYZ classmate, that kind of thing starts to come into play for middle and late childhood. So self-concept is their perception of them as a person. Self-esteem is an evaluative component to that self-concept. So they might say, okay, yes, I work hard, all of these things, but I feel like I'm a terrible person. So self-esteem is the judgment component to their sense of self. And then self-efficacy is how much they feel they're capable of doing tasks in a specific domain. So important to know self-efficacy isn't like, you could have a general self-efficacy where you're like, I think I can handle most things that happen to me. But the truth is, it's much more useful to know what is the domain specific or task specific self-efficacy. So we have something called a science self-efficacy measure where we test how much kids feel, how comfortable they feel with science-related tasks. There's academic self-efficacy where we see how people feel about general academic related tasks like studying, preparing for tests, taking notes, all those things. There could be another type. Maybe there's an artistic self-efficacy where it has to do with creative tasks. So self-efficacy can be very domain specific, but it just boils down to how confident does a person feel about completing tasks in this specific area? That's what self-efficacy is. If a person's self-efficacy is low in a domain that they value, it will damage their self-esteem. However, if their self-efficacy is low in a domain that they don't value that much, then it will not impact self-esteem. So that's how those things are tied. Any questions about that part? Okay, we also talked about moral development at this stage. So Piaget had his ideas of moral development. And really it starts off like, remember, hetero means different. So heteronomous stage of moral development means that you are getting your idea, your sense of right and wrong from others. That's really what it means by heteronomous. So it's your primary caregiver saying, oh, don't take too much candy, right? You should leave some for other people as well. And autonomous, when you reach the autonomous stage, then that means it's coming from within. That by this stage, kids already have a really good sense of what's right and what's wrong. So that's Piaget's. Kohlberg, on the other hand, he had 3 levels: that pre-conventional, conventional, post-conventional. Remember, Kohlberg determined the level based on the Heinz dilemma, right? That story of what's right. And what Kohlberg really focused on is what motivates people to do what is right. So with pre-conventional, what motivates people to do what is right is fear of punishment or desire for reward. That simple, right? I don't want to go to jail, or I want to get this $50 reward for turning this in. That's the motivation pre-conventional. In conventional, you're thinking about social norms, about keeping society, following rules, right? I'm not going to speed because it's against the law to speed, right? That's different from I'm not going to speed because I don't want to get a ticket. So think about that motivation. What is it? And then post-conventional, you're beyond rules. Now you're thinking more like universal ideas of justice, universal ideas of what is right and wrong, right? Now you're not limiting yourself to only what do the rules say, not limiting yourself to what am I going to get a reward for, but you're really thinking about what is the greater good. So with that, okay, let's say the idea is about getting a ticket, right? Then it's like, I'm not gonna do this because I'm afraid to go to jail. I'm doing this because the law says I should follow the speed limit. I'm gonna follow, and then there's post-conventional, I'm gonna follow the speed limit because I don't want to kill anybody, right? So there are different motivations, same action, right? It's just what is it that motivated people to do this? And it's that motivation that tells you what level of morality somebody's in. Any questions about morality or moral development? Okay, so we also talked about stages of friendship, right? There were the 3 stages of friendship from Lagaipa and 5 stages in Selman. Those are in the textbook for sure. Like, so make sure you have a general sense of what those different stages are. And then we had sociometric, that one, popular, rejected, controversial, neglected, and what the average child would be. So if I were to give you an example of a child and how they're interacting with others, you should be able to tell me which of these they would likely be in terms of a sociometric assessment. Any questions about this for middle and late childhood before we move to adolescence? Okay. Adolescence, last chapter, right? So here we talk about growth spurts. So whereas in middle and late childhood, growth slows down. Right before adolescence, kids hit a growth spurt. Unlike prenatal development, which is proximal distal, the development here is distal proximal, meaning the extremities, the hands and the feet grow before the rest of the body. So you might hear phrases like, oh, you need to grow into your feet. This is because in adolescence, their feet, get a lot bigger than the rest of them do. So it looks, sometimes it's funny, where you might have somebody who's like 4'2" and size 8 shoes or something like that. That's very typical in adolescence. So that's distal proximal development. Make sure you know the difference between primary and secondary sexual characteristics. Primary being having to do specifically with the sex organs, right? So we're talking about the ovaries and the uterus for girls, and we're talking about the testicles and the penis for boys, right? Secondary sexual characteristics are the ones we're actually more aware of. So we can't really see what's going on with the primary characteristics, but secondary would be things like facial hair, voice changing, the underarm hair, the breasts for girls, the spreading, the hips get wider, that kind of thing. The boys suddenly get really tall. They start to get chest hair. All of those things are secondary sexual characteristics. What are things happening with the brain? So make sure you have a good idea of what's happening there. Remember that the brain's a lot more developed, but the brain does not develop all at the same time. And so even though kids, we'll talk about the formal operation stage, they're capable of abstract thinking, there's still a disconnect though. Their prefrontal cortex is not fully formed yet. And so that often results to poor decisions. Hippocampus is where our memory is stored. Most of our memories are stored. And so there's greater connectivity between the prefrontal cortex and hippocampus, meaning that their ability to make decisions based on past experiences going to be much better. Limbic system is the part of us that makes us really emotional, right? So that almost hijacks our decision-making process. So things like feeling good because your friends think you're cool, that's going to be more important to us than something that is a more logical, rational choice, right? Remember, like this is all tied in together with hormones. The oxytocin is known as the quote unquote love hormone. That is what makes us like people, right? So when babies are nursing, oxytocin is released. It increases the bonding between the child and the mother. After sexual intercourse, oxytocin is released, increases the bond between the two people who just had intercourse. In terms of adolescence, oxytocin is released when they're hanging out with their friends. So they literally feel good being with other people. They might not know why, but it's because of the oxytocin. Dopamine is also released, so that, feel good feeling that they have when they're with their peers and their peers are accepting them, their peers are telling them they're awesome. That all is actually being triggered by neurotransmitters in their brains. Makes them more likely to do things that their friends think is cool, and that leads to poor decision making, right? So myelination is still happening. Again, you want to have a healthy diet. Fat-free is not a good thing. Avoid fat-free food. No one should be eating fat-free food. Just make better choices. Less processed, right? Synaptic pruning, still at that stage of use it or lose it. Adolescence, we are starting to leave, right, depending on when somebody hits adolescence, that sensitive period of being able to acquire a second language. So people who acquire second language before roughly the age of 12, it's much easier. After 12, it's a lot more effort to learn, and you might not even have that capability to hear all the nuances in terms of other languages. So something to keep in mind in terms of brain development. Talked about at the end of it, kind of the protective factors and risk factors for adolescent pregnancy, right? Really, the stronger the relationship between the parent and the child, the more that, higher self-esteem, those are protective factors against it. Somebody who has low self-esteem, little supervision, and peers or siblings who are active, are sexually active, or are pregnant, that's going to increase the chances of teen pregnancy as well. Make sure you also know the different types of eating disorders. There were 3 of them that we discussed. So anorexia nervosa has the highest fatality of any mental disorder. That's because people just stop eating and they are literally starving themselves to death. So it gets to the point where their organs shut down. So it's really a scary illness. It's tied to body dysmorphia. So when they look in the mirror, they don't actually see that they become skin and bones. In their brains, for whatever reason, they see themselves as very heavy. And that is what motivates them to stop eating. So that's anorexia nervosa. Bulimia nervosa is when people will like not eat for a long time and then suddenly binge. And then after that binging, they feel bad and then they do something compensatory. They might make themselves vomit. They might take laxatives. They might exercise, to an extreme amount. But they're doing these compensatory behaviors to try to get rid of any calories that they may have gained by the binge eating. So you see the difference with anorexia, you just stop eating. With bulimia nervosa, you don't eat for a while, then you binge eat, and then you do something to try to get rid of the calories. And then binge eating is just, you get into these bouts of, eating a lot of food and you feel sick about it. You're not happy about it, but you don't really engage into these other compensatory behaviors to get rid of the calories. Any questions about the different eating disorders? Okay, cognitive development. So we are now in the formal operational stage in Piaget's framework. This is the last stage, right? So adolescence, you can start thinking about abstract concepts. That's the idea there. You can start talking about hypothetical situations easily. Some of these components you need to know, right? Adolescent egocentrism. Very different from early childhood egocentrism. In early childhood egocentrism, it's the idea that they think everyone has the same brain that they do, right? Like it's almost like a communal brain. They don't understand that other people have different thoughts or wants or desires. In adolescent egocentrism, it's reflected in that imaginary audience where they feel like all of their flaws and errors, everybody is noticing it, right? If they make a mistake, oh my gosh, everybody noticed it. When the truth is that other people in the room are just as preoccupied with their own things as they are, right? But that's adolescent egocentrism. So imaginary audience is just what I explained, where people think, teenagers think that everyone's paying attention to all the bad things and flaws that they have. Personal fable is when somebody, a teenager, thinks that they're invulnerable. It's called a personal fable because it's almost like they're their own superhero. Even if they heard that, their best friend may have been in a car accident from driving too fast, they'll still speed and they'll be like, it's not going to happen to me. It's not going to happen to me part. That's the personal fable. Other things that ways of thinking are introspection, idealism, hypocrisy, and pseudo-stupidity. Make sure you know the differences for that. So introspection is just thinking more deeply and reflecting about things that are happening. That's a wonderful thing. So when a teenager goes into the room, shuts the door, and you see them just lying in their bed thinking, that's introspection. Idealism is holding others to a high standard, or just thinking more generally about having high standards for things, about what's the ideal, what is the best way things should happen. Hypocrisy happens when they hold others to a standard that they don't hold for themselves. So this is why teenagers are super critical of their parents, right? Because of that, they had the idealism, and hypocrisy is like, oh man, there is nothing harder than to drive with somebody who's learning how to drive, right? Because every mistake you make, they're going to call you out on it. But then when they drive, they might make the same mistakes, but they don't think it's as bad if they do it. That's the idea with hypocrisy. And then pseudo-stupidity, it's called pseudo-stupidity because they're not really stupid. They're just overcomplicating situations to the point where it causes them to make mistakes. That's why it's called pseudo-stupidity. It's overthinking, overcomplicating a situation. Hypothetical deductive reasoning. So there's inductive reasoning and deductive reasoning. When you are at the formal operational stage, are actually capable of both, right? So deductive reasoning, you have general principles, and then you use the general principles to pull together the different aspects, maybe the different components that you see. With inductive reasoning, you see the different, different clues, and then you use it to come to a conclusion. If any of you still know who Sherlock Holmes is, they used to say it's deductive reasoning. No, actually, Sherlock Holmes used inductive reasoning, not deductive reasoning, because Sherlock Holmes would look at a scene, look at the different clues, and use it to pull together that information to derive what happened. That is inductive reasoning, not deductive reasoning. So at formal operational stage, people are capable of doing that. Logical and critical thinking, all of these really great abilities. And that's why as we get older, as we go up in the grades, the levels of expectation increase as well, because we know people are cognitively able to do this. To ask somebody in kindergarten to think logically and critical, it doesn't really make sense. They're not cognitively capable of doing that yet. But somebody who's in 7th, 8th grade, you better believe they can handle it. Okay, so the dual process model, intuitive thought, analytic thought, you might also hear that is thinking fast and slow. So intuitive thought is fast thinking, it's impulsive, it is just, doing things on spur of the moment, oftentimes is emotional. Analytic thought is slow thinking, it's taking into account all of the different facts, all of the different aspects of a situation and slowly, rationally thinking it through. That is analytic thought. So the idea is that we do both. Intuitive thought is actually lower level, right? You want to get into the pace where you don't discount your intuition, definitely not, but you can actually make better decisions by thinking more slowly and analytically. Any questions about cognitive development in adolescence? Okay. So now we're at socio-emotional development. So here in Piaget's stage, we're talking about identity versus role confusion, right? So the truth is that you don't actually stop at this stage. I would say it's the start of exploring one's identity. And the idea is if you don't start doing that, you could get really mixed up and not really have a good sense of self. What's important to know here at Marcia's 4 identity statuses. So remember, the dimension is how much has somebody explored and how much has someone committed. Those are the 2 dimensions. If you are at identity diffusion, it means that you're not exploring your identity and you're not committing, right? Also known as role confusion. People, maybe it just doesn't mean anything to them. Remember, we have different identities, right? So there's the ethnic identity, gender identity, maybe political identity. We have many different identities, and our status could be different depending on the identity. Identity foreclosure means you are not exploring, but you're already committed. So that would be somebody who just kind of follows along with what mom and dad say is the right thing to do, right? That's foreclosed. Identity moratorium is somebody who is exploring but not committed. We want people to go through this stage. We want people to explore the different identities so that they can really be satisfied that they've done all this exploration, so that they can get to the identity achieve stage, which is where you have explored and now you are committed to your identity. Any questions about these statuses? Okay, so make sure you also know the different terms we talked about in terms of peers with adolescents. So homophily, right? Homo is same. So that is that idea that adolescents want to be with people, they want to make friends with people who are similar to them in some way. That doesn't necessarily mean same race or ethnicity. It could mean people who have the same sport interest. Or maybe, so this is where the whole idea of the cliques and the crowds come in, where, you know, oh, there are the jocks, there are the nerds, there are, you know, the geeks, or, you know, the goths, all these different groups. That's because people like to hang out with those who are similar to them, who have similar ideas or values or activities, that adolescents tend to group together that way. Deviant peer contagion is when the peers are encouraging, motivating adolescents to engage in negative, deviant behaviors, skipping school, taking drugs, smoking. All of these things would be considered deviant peer contagion if the influence is coming from the peers. So at this stage, adolescence, it is so important for people to choose their friends wisely, because at this stage, friends, the peers, have more influence on the kids than their own families. And so it's really important that they choose there's the whole, tell me who your friends are and I will tell you who you are, that component. So any questions about these concepts that I discussed with chapter 4, 5, and 6? Okay, remember, I can't read your minds. So possible matching short answer topics. I will tell you that the exam is 60 points and 30 of the points are short answer. So you should have a good understanding of these concepts, right? Because remember, that's where you get to show off how much you know about these. So for chapter 4, I would be asking questions about types of friendship, maybe parenting styles. Chapter 5, well, this could also work with chapter 4, the cognitive concepts that we talked about, the centration, the identity, you know, reversibility. That's what I mean by cognitive concepts. Intelligence theories, there will be short answers on that. So just like, you know, Jasmine's asking, what kind of questions you'd be asking? Well, it could be something as simple as comparing them. Or if I gave you, you know, these concepts, which theorist is it? Explain. You know, there's going to be a lot of explain and give examples. So make sure you can do that. Theories of gender development. So Could be questions of those three different theories. Stages of morality could be Piaget's, could be Kohlberg's. So make sure you know those, components as well. And then chapter 6 would be identity statuses. There's also the ethnic identity development component as well. And the idea of, importance of peers and everything. So those are the possible matching short answer topics. Any questions about these? Let me stop sharing. No questions? So I get to, I'm gonna interpret that as everybody's got it down, right?
I have one question, Professor. So in the study guide it says no language development. Will there be any questions pertaining to that in the actual exam, or is it just completely random?
Oh, no, I'm not. That's why I said no language development.
Okay,
I'm not
so
thinking about. What do you mean by completely random? I'm a little confused by what you're saying.
I just meant like you know how you randomize the questions among every single every examiner. I was
Yeah.
just wondering if there's a possibility of it even being on there.
No, I don't know.
Okay.
I could we have some time. I can give some of the sample short answer, not short answer, the multiple choice. Let me go to that. I mean, so those who were in class, they know you guys have seen this already. Whoops, I'm sorry. Let me stop sharing for a second. I did that wrong.
Professor, I have another question about chapter 4 and friendships. So I know that in chapter 5, we kind of learn about Selman's 5 stages of friendship. Is that different than?
Same. I may have made a mistake on that part. It's the same.
Oh, okay, so that's the same because I don't recall chapter 4 friendships.
So it should have been chapter 5. I apologize.
Oh, no worries. Don't apologize. No worries at all.
It's okay. Thank you. I'm getting too old for this, I think. Let's see. Okay, so here, oops, no, let me change that. That's not right. I'll do some of the questions and then we can stop it. So this is going to be more helpful for my online students who haven't seen this before, but could be a refresher for others. So these are examples of some multiple choice questions that I might have. So Cain loves to draw and presented his mother with scribbles that he said was a picture of his father. How old is Cain likely to be? So based on the charts that you saw, you should be able to tell me 3, 4, or 5 years old. Oops. So 3 years old, right? So scribbles, by the time somebody's 5, they can actually make a figure that looks reasonably like a person. Harry was trying to explain to Ron that 5 times 4 equals 20 is equivalent to 20 divided by 4 equals 5, or 20 divided by 5 equals 4. Ron is having a lot of trouble understanding this concept. What concrete operational ability is Ron lacking? Is it seriation, classification, reversibility, or identity? So I can easily come up with these kind of questions, right? And so you need to know the differences among them that you can easily identify what skill. So this would be reversibility, right? Because 5 times 4 equals 20, you reverse that, it's 20 divided by 4 equals 5. That's the idea with reversibility. Hermione is trying to come up with stories that will help her keep the order of certain words and a spell correct. Which memory strategy is she using? Is it rehearsal, organization, elaboration, or memorization? So these are memory strategies, and I believe it's about middle and late childhood where they start to engage in this, I think. So coming up with stories, that would be elaboration. Rehearsal is just repeating the spell over and over again. Organization would be some sort of chunking that she would be doing. So again, be able to distinguish from among them. Mary Lou is getting very frustrated that her friend Newt doesn't understand why many people need to use mnemonic devices to remember important facts. This is an example of mediation deficiency, production deficiency, utilization deficiency, or critical thinking deficiency. So this one would be a mediation deficiency. It's like, why are we even using these different strategies, right? Production deficiency is they don't know when to use it. Utilization deficiency is using it incorrectly. And I made up critical thinking. Bruce believed that wearing a mask in the color black would scare others away. Which concept or concepts is he applying? Select all correct answers. So I wouldn't do this to you in the exam, but it's a good practice. Is it intuitive thought, symbolic representation, conservation, or theory of mind? It's 3 of them. It's intuitive thought because he's just believing in it. He's not like thinking rationally, right? This is a way of knowing. Symbolic representation, he understands that because that's why he'd be doing wearing the mask in the color black. In and of itself, the color black isn't meaningful. You have to know that it represents something to people. And then theory of mind, because he understands that other people have different understanding of things. So if he didn't think that it was going to scare others, if he's not even, if there was something in there that Bruce just wanted to do this, but he knows that his friend is just like him and wouldn't get scared of it, then the idea there is he does not have theory of mind. But the fact that he's thinking about what might scare other people, he does have theory of mind. So if there's anything I say that you're not sure of, please, be sure to speak up and I'll stop and explain it. Arthur was very angry because his brother Orm kept teasing him about his hair. Arthur was just about to punch Orm when he stopped and thought about how upset his mother would be. What did Arthur show? Is that response initiation, response inhibition, delayed gratification, or cowardice? So you look at that and you're like, oh, he was just about to punch him and he stopped himself. So that means it is response initiation. All right. Raiden is 10 years old and can easily sort out his sister's Pokemon cards. Which of these cognitive skills is he using when completing this task? Is it classification, identification, conservation, or seriation? It is classification. So for this one, he's just sorting it out. That's why it's classification. Seriation would be if he's doing some kind of ranking, right? Identification is just like, does he know which ones they are? And conservation does not even make sense for this one. All right, Kano has a mental age of 16, but a chronological age of 32. What's his IQ? Is it 200, well above the average IQ? Is it 100, consistent with the average IQ? That should be IQ, sorry. Is it 50, well below the average IQ, or none of these answers are correct? So you'd have to know how to calculate IQ. So this one, it's 50, well below the average IQ. So obviously to get 50, you would take the mental age, divide by the chronological age, and multiply by 100. I just saw the chat. Okay, the exam is going to be due Friday night. So it opens up tonight. You have all of Thursday, all of Friday, and then it's due by 11:59. I recommend you do it early, and because if you have any problems with respondents, you need to submit a ticket so that you can get it resolved by Friday. So don't wait until Friday to take your first attempt. Just like the previous midterm exam, you can have 2 attempts. All right, Liu Kang believes that he has kinesthetic intelligence more than linguistic intelligence. Which theory of intelligence does he likely follow? Spearman's generalized and specific intelligence theory, Gardner's multiple intelligences theory, Sternberg's traffic theory, or Dweck's growth versus fixed mindset. So I don't remember who asked me the question about how I would ask about intelligence theories. Here you go. So I will use its terminology and you tell me which theory it is. In this case, it is Gardner's multiple intelligences theory. The other theories do not include anything about kinesthetic intelligence or linguistic intelligence. All right, Clint is having trouble with capturing how he feels in an assigned essay. Clint wants to be a writer. Which area of his self will this likely affect? Is it self-concept, self-esteem, self-determination, self-efficacy? So there's actually two answers for this one. It is self-esteem and self-efficacy. Self-efficacy, because it's about the writing domain. He's having trouble capturing how it feels, so it's going to affect how confident he is about his writing ability. It's also self-esteem because of the second sentence. Clint wants to be a writer. If you want to be a writer, then your ability to write is something you value. And if you are not good at something you value, it will affect your self-esteem. Any questions? All right, Natasha is wandering around a store and found a $20 bill. She brings it up to the cashier because she would want someone to do the same for her. What level of morality is Natasha demonstrating? Is this pre-conventional, conventional, post-conventional, or unconventional? This is post-conventional. Why? What is motivating her to do it? It's because she wants someone else to do the same for her. So that's kind of a universal sense of justice. If I said she brings it up to the cashier because she's afraid they will think she stole it, that's not post-conventional anymore, right? That would be pre-conventional, right? Fear, right? If we said something like, oh, because you know, her mother told her you should always turn it back. If it's like kind of some sort of rule, then it would be conventional. So always look at what is the motivating factor, and that's how you determine the level of morality. Tony and Steve are the same age. They don't see each other often, but can talk about anything when they do. What stage of friendship are they demonstrating? So is it reward cost? Is it normative expectation, empathy, understanding, or one-way assistance? If you have a friend you haven't seen for a long time and you can reconnect with them very easily, that's the highest form of friendship. That would be empathy and understanding. All right. Martha thought it was cute when Bruce would talk back to her, but her husband Thomas felt it was disrespectful and spanked Bruce every time he did it. What are Martha's and Thomas's parenting styles? So the first one's Martha, second one's Thomas. So remember, answer the first one because that will help you eliminate any of the others. So Martha thinks it's cute when kids talk back to her. Is that authoritative, permissive, or uninvolved? So thinking it's cute, I'm going to say that is permissive, right? Now, Thomas spanks him anytime he does it. So now you think, is that permissive, authoritative, or authoritarian? It's definitely not permissive. Authoritative, remember, rhymes with give. That'd be somebody who's more understanding. Or is it authoritarian, rhymes with barbarian, hard-nosed? I would say D, permissive and authoritarian. All right, one more. Selena was jogging around the park when Bruce caught her eye. As they were talking, she was surprised when he told her they often saw each other in the coffee shop, but they never talked. Based on what you know about emotions, what could account for change in Natasha's more positive assessment of Bruce? So remember, emotions have three components to it. It has the physiological response, the cognitive component, and the affective component. So is it because of something going on with her body that she reacted differently? Is it because of a way that she interpreted, labeled her interaction with Bruce, or is it simply her feeling? Got to break down this question, right? Jogging around the park, she sees Bruce. So when you're jogging, right? Your heart is racing. Bruce says they saw each other in the coffee shop, but in the coffee shop, she never noticed him. So it's not the first time she sees Bruce. So what's the difference? The difference here is that she's jogging around. So it's a physiological response that can account for her more positive assessment of Bruce. She has met him before, right? It's just a matter of something going on with her body that changed. Okay, I'll do one more to make it 15. Jean is in trouble with her parents for sneaking out at night and drinking with some friends. She was crying hysterically when she got caught, and now she's so upset she's throwing objects around her room. Based on what you know about teen emotions, it is likely that Jean is in middle or late childhood, early adolescence, or is it mid-adolescence or late adolescence? Sorry, I should have fixed that question. Sorry, Brendan. So in this one, kind of went over in the slides about different stages of adolescence. If somebody is in like extreme emotion and also kind of losing, taking a temper tantrum, it's very likely they are in early adolescence. So it is 6:30. Thank you for giving me an hour and a half of your time. I really appreciate it. Let me stop this recording.